For more now, we're joined by Stephen Olson. He's a senior visiting fellow from ISEAS-Yusof Ishak Institute and a former U.S. trade negotiator. Steve, thanks for your time this morning. So, Trump administration will start charging 25% tariffs to South Korea, Japan on their imports starting the 1st of August. So it is less than a month from now, but it still gives some time to negotiate. And from what we've seen in the past, do you expect Japan and South Korea to be able to reach a deal or the administration to walk back on that figure?
Well, look, I'm not sure anything is dramatically different today than it was yesterday, and I'm not sure that we've got any greater clarity at the close of this 90-day negotiating period than we did at the onset. The tariffs have remained basically the same, and the letters that went out yesterday basically just provided a 3-week extension without any guarantee that the deadline won't be extended again. So the negotiating dynamics and the ability of Japan, South Korea, or any other country to reach a deal really have not been that dramatically shifted. One change that I think has occurred is that all of these delays might suggest to trade partners that the U.S. is realizing that it might have miscalculated and that it might not have quite the amount of leverage that it thought it did. If that's the case, it bodes well for the U.S. trade partners.
Okay, I just want to focus on Japan and South Korea for a moment there. I mean, there's been some pushback from Japan a few days ago where the prime minister has vowed not to easily compromise on Trump's tariffs. Do you think that the key trading partners like Japan and South Korea have the capacity to strike back? I mean, what would retaliation look like if that's the case?
I think the longer things go on, the relative strength of Japan, Korea, European Union, or any of the trading partners increases. In terms of specific retaliation, there are significant economic relations, and these countries have arrows in their quivers that they could use. Where we're going to end up by August 1st or beyond that is really anyone's guess, though. But I think from a tactical point of view, the Japanese prime minister and the Europeans that are signaling a stronger stance are probably taking a prudent course of action here.
Stephen, other bits of the announcement include 25% tariffs on Malaysia, Kazakhstan, 30% on South Africa, 40% on Laos and Myanmar. I mean, how significant are these countries to the U.S.'s trade deficit? And what does this mean for the negotiating power of these countries if they are seen to have smaller impact on deficit? I mean, when you compare it to Japan and South Korea, for example.
Sure. I have to admit the selection of the 14 or so countries that were selected to receive these letters struck me as a little bit bizarre because, as you mentioned, some of those smaller economies have virtually no impact whatsoever on the U.S. trade deficit or on the larger American economy. So how and why these countries ended up on the list to receive letters, I don't know. In terms of what negotiating leverage a country like Tunisia might have vis-a-vis the United States, it's extremely limited.
And beyond economics, just how risky is it to threaten close allies like Japan and South Korea with tariffs, particularly amid, the security partnerships in the Indo-Pacific, and especially in terms of countering China?
In my judgment, it's actually quite risky because keep in mind, one point of clarity that I think has emerged from these discussions is that the United States intends to use these negotiations to push countries into trying to squeeze China out of their supply chains to the extent possible. Now, that's going to significantly complicate the relationships of these countries with China and ultimately could end up causing at least some of these countries to tilt further in the direction of China.
Steve, I mean, you said before that the tariffs will ultimately hurt the U.S. I mean, it's time to visit that point now that we have a clearer idea of the numbers that we are dealing with. Do you still think so? And how badly could that damage to the U.S. economy be? I mean, talk to us about the longer term impact. Or do you think, Donald Trump's recently signed big, beautiful bill is enough to fill the Treasury's coffers and doesn't really have to worry about the impact from tariffs?
Well, I think to a certain extent, the impact of the tariffs on the U.S. economy, particularly as regards inflation, will be driven to a large extent by who eats those tariffs. Now, Trump has insisted all along that the exporting countries pay those tariffs. Technically speaking, it's the importers that pay those tariffs, and to the extent that they pass those additional costs along to consumers, that will most certainly have an impact on inflation. As a practical matter, in a lot of instances, we see importers and exporters striking deals to sort of share the pain of these tariff increases. So we've got to see exactly how that's going to play out before we can assess what the precise impact is going to be, certainly on inflation in the United States.
And Stephen, from a business perspective, just how challenging is it for companies, planning investments, deal making, and supply chain operations effectively amidst such tariff unpredictability?
It's an absolute nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. I don't know how you attempt to manage supply chains across multiple countries when you do not have a clear picture of what the tariff situation is going to be from country to country and from month to month, week to week, and days to day. The tariffs that either are in effect or could go in effect are shifting. So this degree of chaos and uncertainty is an absolute nightmare for businesses.
Right, Stephen, and Donald Trump has also threatened BRICS additional 10% tariffs or so-called anti-American policies. How might this spur alternative trade blocs, and does this risk accelerating the de-dollarization or even decoupling trends?
I don't know quite what to make of that late night, I think it was Sunday in the U.S. social media post from the President of the United States and the extent to which it's serious. I think the leader's statement that took some thinly veiled swipes at Trump's tariff policies probably stoked him a little bit. Whether or not these 10% tariffs on BRICS, and as he described, any countries that align with the quote unquote anti-American views of BRICS would be subject to this 10%. Let's see what actually comes to pass. I'm not sure. However, I would say that this whole episode will provide a stronger impetus for countries in BRICS and beyond to look to move to a post-US-led world order, particularly in finance. Now, the bigger question is to what extent will they have the capacity to actually pull that off? And that's more of an open question.
All right, Stephen, thank you for your time this morning. Stephen Olson there, he is Senior Visiting Fellow from the ISEAS-Yusof Ishak Institute and former U.S. trade negotiator.